Welcome to Association Chat, an online discussion where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with the topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italienne, and when the COVID-19 pandemic really kicked in and seemingly overnight, we were sheltering in place. Association leaders and the events community braced themselves. Meetings were on hold or canceled. We were scrambling to figure out how to do things virtually. And by the time our nation and world began to come out of it, we had already begun to ask ourselves all kinds of questions about who we are and what we're about, so that we are still asking ourselves those questions today. And as a matter of fact, as our meetings begin to happen in person more and more often and more, we are coming together live and in person again. We're running into all kinds of interesting conundrums, such as what happens when there's a meeting that's happening in a place, in a state, that doesn't align with your personal values. Does your organization boycott? Do you, as an attendee, still go? What are your options? What should you do? This is sort of the foundation for the discussion we're going to have today with my very special guests. I have Elena Gerstmann and Rhonda Payne. Elena, Rhonda, thank you for joining me today on Association Chat as we talk about social offsetting and what is social offset. Welcome.
Thanks for having me and us.
I know.
So this is exciting.
I know it's super exciting. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy you're here. Look at this beautiful artwork in the background, Elena's artwork, your background. I feel like, we're really bringing our A games today. This topic, I was trying to set the foundation for it, but there are so many more questions to explore and so many things about this idea of social offsetting. So I thought we might just start right there. And Elena, I'm going to direct this question to you. What is social offset? What is this? Can you explain the concept to those who may not be familiar with it?
Sure. I loved how you set it up. And actually, I probably can't. So you said interesting conundrum. And I was like, those are two words that are like perfectly matched for social offset. So let me actually start with the story. A few years ago, pre-COVID, I was in the Dallas airport and I was looking for something to eat. And the only place I found that had something that I would want to eat was Chick-fil-A. Now, Chick-fil-A is a good restaurant and some people like them and all, but I'm part of the queer community. And years ago, one of their founders or officers gave money to anti-LGBTQ charity and was against same-sex marriage. So I was like, so I typically do not go to Chick-fil-A, but I'm in line to get this Chick-fil-A. And in my head, I'm like, what am I doing? I shouldn't be doing this. And I wind up buying that sandwich. And the next thing I do is I go to one of those uncomfortable seats in the airport and I get on my computer and I'm like, okay, how much money did I possibly profit can they make on this sandwich that could technically go to the officer's wallet for this officer to put in the, a Chick-fil-A corporate officer to give to an anti-LGBTQ charity. So I was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was some way that I could do that on an app or something to actually give money to, say, counteract my purchase, right? Mm-hmm. So I originally got this yummy sandwich, but I don't like the corporation. How do I offset that? So I talked with my friend Mark Beebe about it, and then COVID hit, things got in the way, and we let it go dormant. And then fast forward post-Dobbs decision, and the ASAE meeting that was a few weeks ago in Nashville, Erin Fuller, who I know both of you know from MCI, sent out a note to some of her friends saying, what should we do? We're going to Nashville and we're paying taxes to a state government where we disagree with. So, so the idea of social offset, the two words got married together when I was in a car with my wife and we were talking about this. And one of us said social offset. I don't know which one said it first. So I know this is like the origin story, but I hope it tells you what the social offset is. It's about using your money and your time, because it's not just about money, to offset or counteract the money that you're spending in a location that goes counter to your belief. So it's like rebalancing the energy of the world. So if you go to Nashville, and Aaron looked at this, is like about $50 a day of your taxes when you're at a hotel and eating and drinking will go to the state government. If you disagree with some of those values, and for the Nashville piece was abortion care, we just focused on reproductive health care, then can you be giving $50 or whatever you can afford to an abortion care provider to counteract what your state dollars are doing? And now, and I'll stop talking and let Rhonda go in, is, we've now built up a bigger framework that's more than reproductive health care.
Well, and that's actually, I mean, I love the way that you set that up, because understanding the backstory behind where this idea came from, and a lot of people are familiar with carbon offsetting and that idea. So you've got the social offsetting. So how are you balancing out the impact of you showing up in a state that has legislation that you don't support, right? That doesn't align with your values. Rhonda, oh, I've known Rhonda for so long, and you've seen her on Association Chat before for different things. CEO and founder of Flock Theory. Rhonda, what drew you to social offset? What was it about it that made you think, oh, I've got to be a part of this?
Kiki, thank you for the question. Thank you for having us on as your guest. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you. Three things come right to mind when I think about what drew me in. First, anyone listening, you all know this idea is inspired. It's like the second you hear it, it just clicks and you're like, yes, where has this been all my life? Right? We're feeling that urgency now, post-pandemic, or post-pandemic.
Yeah.
But really, right? Right. We all know, right? We're not really post, but we're on some sort of downtick. But it's like we've needed this for so long. The need for it's only accelerated now, right? But we've needed it before, and we just didn't know. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that Elena Gerstmann reached out to me. And so as a friend said, when she asks, you say yes. Listen, just trust me and thank me later. Anyone watching, if Elena asks you something, think carefully. You probably want to say yes. So that was number two. And number three is really that I'm all about equity. So Flock Theory is about equity, my company, but really Flock Theory is about equity because I'm personally invested in equity as a core value. And what I realized very quickly is that Social Offset is a nonprofit that's focused on equity at its core. And that synergy felt so right to me. So it's, when I think about the main areas of focus, from racial equity to LGBTQIA equity to reproductive health, and essentially gender related equity as related to that, socioeconomic equity, which touches on hunger and homelessness. All these issues really do drill down into something that's so meaningful and personal to me. That I just was thrilled to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Elena had the great insight to reach out to you. She had the great insight to reach out to others. I chased her down. I was like, how can I become a part of this when I heard about it? Because I was so excited by the idea. I arrived in Nashville, and I have to admit, for me, going to ASAE annual, I was very excited to see everyone after so many years of being pulled away. It had been 3 years for me since I had really been able to connect with people in my industry, our industry. And so I wanted to be there, but I didn't want to show support after the Roe v. Wade being overturned and all of that really hit me hard. And I felt I felt morally obligated to do something, but I didn't know what. And it was like an answer, just an inspired answer that arrived at the perfect time when I saw something about it. I was so thankful because I had decided that it was important for me to be there, but that I needed to figure out some way to offset the impact. And there it was. There was the answer. And what I found extremely helpful was that there was even a calculation that was a rough calculation you could do, that was a suggestion. It wasn't that was exactly it, but it was a suggestion for people who were there. This percentage of each drink that will be bought for you will go to the state. This percentage of each day in a hotel room will go to the state. You can do a calculation, donate that much. And I sat there in my hotel room. I did my calculation and I submitted that and I used it. And I thought, this is brilliant. Is this, I mean, talk to me a little bit, Elena, about what you thought about that experiment that you were running in Nashville, because I can't imagine sort of the nerves that you had going into it. Would it fly? Would it work? You know, our keynote, the first keynote that we heard from in Nashville was talking about experiments and the importance of making experiments. And you were in the midst of doing one yourself. Tell me about how that went.
It was so exciting. I mean, one of the things with the minimum viable product, which a few speakers mentioned that at ASAE, and we were actually living it. Every time that someone mentioned it, I was like, and we're doing it now, a lean startup. And kudos to Beth Sermont, who's on our board of directors, and also my wife. She kept saying before we got to Nashville, as I got, my eyes were getting huge, she's like, minimum viable product, to make sure we didn't bite off more than we can chew. But I think one of the things, first of all, Rhonda, thank you for the compliment. And if you ever ask me for anything, I say yes. And when Kiki said she was interested, I was like, if she ever wants to help you with something, you say yes. Which is what I did. But one of the things I hear from people, especially when I talk to folks who don't know it, they're like, that's so simple. Why didn't I think of it? Like, it really is a simple idea. And many of us have probably thought about it in different areas. But, what I think is unique and it's so exciting is we put it together. And now we have who's who of the association space dedicated to it on the board. We all have baked in values in terms of DEI that we will make sure from the get-go social offset is an all-inclusive organization. But one of the things, I'm sorry, to get to your question about being there, it was so easy. It was so exciting because if I was talking to an attendee, I would say like, well, what did you think about coming here? Were you concerned about that? If you were, go to socialoffset.com and take a look and see what we're doing there. And if you're care about reproductive health care, if you can go ahead, and we just have one charity up. If I was talking to a city, I'll talk about Visit Salt Lake, our first investor. I said, I know some people don't want to go to Salt Lake, or associations have a tough time bringing their group to Salt Lake City because of the state's policies. Social Offset can help you with that because we can pick a number of causes and charities together, whether it's reproductive health care, anti-racism, LGBTQ rights, plus rights, hunger, homelessness, environmental. Like, we can pick the charities that best match your objectives or your other association's objectives and put together a page for you. And then the third use case was the association meeting planner and or CEO. And as someone who is the executive director of an association who has a conference next month in Indiana, I'm getting emails saying, I don't want to go to Indiana. Should we boycott? Why won't you go virtual? And as a CEO, I have to respond to that. Now, I'm not using social offset because of some conflict of interest for the time being. Mm-hmm. But when I was talking to other association CEOs, I was like, wouldn't this be nice to say, you know what, here's a page. If you're interested, it's optional. But there's a number of local charities that might help you make a decision to attend our event as opposed to not attend our event. And I'm sure we'll get to boycotts later. But that's what I was feeling at the at ASAE, it was just so easy to explain it, and the excitement and the fact that Visit Salt Lake, Visit Seattle, and Visit Austin all pledged right then and there to give us money so we can get this startup up and running. It just bowed me for actually Visit Seattle made me cry when they pledged to me, or just because it was like, that was the second I realized, oh my gosh, I think we might be onto something.
Well, and that is such I think that's such a critical piece of this conflict, that those of us who are in the position of making decisions where it's like either we go ahead and carry through with having that meeting there, or we don't, or we take some kind of action. That's been weighing pretty heavily on a lot of different people who are in those positions where they have to decide to do something, and either they feel that they can or they can't or they shouldn't. And what complicated it is that we're coming out of this time where, because of the pandemic, we had to, a lot of times we've used reserves, or we had to pull out of contracts, and it had this costly impact on what we're dealing with economically in our associations. Rhonda, I know that you've heard these stories and been in the midst of them and dealing with them and talking about them. So asking you to put your events professional, learning professional, education professional hat on, I mean, what do you see going into this? Why is this the time for an idea like social offset?
Well, Kiki, thank you for that. And of course, it's not difficult for me to put on my learning and events hat. It's really, the road that brought me here. For folks who don't know, I served for a number of years as the chief of learning for ASAE, and I had similar roles leading learning and events in other organizations. Across the political spectrum, I might add. And so there were many times where there were misalignments that I was experiencing in my life, right? In my professional life. And I think that now, is a great time. If you had asked me this 5 years ago, if it was a great time, I probably would have said yes, to be fair. But I think now is a great time, because I think the community, the events community, not just in associations, but the broader events community and society really are in a different headspace, right? We are giving ourselves permission to think differently about things, and to not choose only a single path towards what our objectives might be. And so boycotting, is one path towards trying to affect change. And I think now there's just new permission and new technology and new capabilities and new energy around approaching equity and alignment in our whole lives. There's just all these things have come together for a time where it's really accessible. It feels really possible. Right? And I know I, for one, and I think, all of the folks, both, formally involved with social offset and those who have heard about it, who are volunteering, who are supporting, I think there's a real momentum, a real movement that's possible now. And that's, the timing is always perfect when you can grasp hold of that momentum and turn it into a movement. That's why the time is now, because we can affect real change together.
So if I think about that, I mean, so plus 1,000 to what you just said, I think some of it is post murder of George Floyd, where we realized, I'll speak for myself, I realized that there are lots of people who think like I do, who are upset about how the world is going, and frankly, upset about I'm doing something, but not enough. So what can I do? And I think that, the world has changed a lot since he was murdered, and then you add COVID to it. And then we need lots of things. And social offset is not the answer to everything. It's one little thing. It took us hundreds of years to get to the place that we are in society. We're not going to have one silver bullet. So this is just one thing that we can do. And knowing that we're part of a larger community that has similar values, I think is so important. And I think that's why this is the time for social offset now for me, is that we have that momentum to build on what Rhonda was saying.
Well, I actually want to just jump right into that, addressing that question of greenwashing, or Rhonda, you called it what, woke washing. The other day when we were chatting, she said this, was like, oh, that's way better. That's way better than the greenwashing. So woke washing. Looking at boycotts and thinking about examples in the past where maybe they worked, or maybe there's a lot of back and forth that you can find online about, do they actually work? Are they effective? I mean, what do you say about that? Because I have to admit, the very first pushback that I saw about the concept was this idea of, well, I'm just going to stay home because boycotting it will be more effective than just going and making me feel less guilty about it personally, And so what do you have to say about that? And I'm looking to you, Elena. You've got a grin on your face, like you're ready for it.
I just love it because it keeps me up at night. I mean, when I came up with this, like, this is not the answer to do whatever you want, wherever you want, and spend your money whatever you want because you can wash your guilt away by donating money. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a way that if you have to, or if it's in your self-interest to spend this money because of your profession or your network or your community, how about offset it? If you have the means to offset it, if you don't have the financial means, maybe there's another way to do it. So to me, it's not greenwashing, woke washing, if it's part of something larger. And one of the things I think about boycotting, when I hear when people say they're going to stay home and then they post it on Twitter, like, I'm not going because of this. I feel like that's actually, and no, I want to support my friends in the community and all, but to me, that's almost like I'm going to take my toys and go home, as opposed to, how about we go to the location? How about we actually pay our fees at the hotel that are giving many of people who might be in marginalized communities a job? How about we show them that we're there and we care about them, because many of them have the people that we interact with in these cities share our same values. How about we say to them, hey, thanks for voting in this group. In this state, we can't vote, but we're with you. And then somehow offsetting that. So instead of boycotting it, we're showing our support. Maybe we're writing letters, maybe we're volunteering, maybe we're just giving money, but there's so many more things that I think that it's a valid question to ask. And I hope that people hold us accountable, that we're not just saying, do this, wash your sins away with your cash and you're fine. That's not what we're saying. I mean, when I was in Nashville, I would have loved a new pair of cowboy boots. But I didn't want to put more money into the economy. Because I didn't need those, right? I wanted to be at ASAE, so I offset that. I didn't buy a pair of boots. So,
yeah. Thoughts, Rhonda? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to add, when I think about that question of, boycotting and does boycotting work, my perspective is definitely a yes and, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and sometimes they don't. Often they don't. Yes, and sometimes they take decades to manifest what you're fighting for. Yes, and sometimes they become more around hurting an entity's reputation than affecting a change. And so for me, boycotting does work. And I want to give, due respect to the role that boycotting as a form of consumer activism plays in our society. I personally believe it's an important one. I think the three of us, I'll just go out on a limb and say that I'm pretty sure all three of us do, right? And there's some really good examples historically of boycotting working, right? You think of the civil rights movement, right? Protests against segregation, Montgomery, Tallahassee, bus boycotts. These are boycotts that worked, right? There's any number of examples of boycotts that have worked, from unionizing to, I mean, you could go way back to like Tea Party type boycotting. And that, I mean, essentially that was boycotting too. And so boycotting does work, but it does take a level of organization, a level of pressure, a level of finance, and an organized ask that can be accomplished by the person in power for them to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, I think it's nice, and really nice is just not even strong enough of a word, to have another channel for our consumer activism. Because when, I've been there, right? Your convention's coming up, people are calling. When they say they're staying home, the truth is they're not boycotting that state. They're boycotting their association.
Yeah.
Right. And they are hurting the association, not the state.
Right.
And so I think it's really for all of us an opportunity to step back and be thoughtful about what we're really trying to accomplish with our act, or when we choose to withhold our support or our financials or our attendance. Make sure it's aimed at the right root cause, make sure it's organized, and rather than boycott your association's event and hurt your association that you obviously believe in, it's why you're a member, right? It might be better to channel that activism differently, to try and get at root causes together. And usually that's right on the ground in local communities, because no state is a monolith of viewpoints, right? There are people in the local community who are just as horrified as you are about a policy or a law, possibly more so, because when you think about it, they live there. They are living under that law. And so going there and using our power differently on the ground locally to ally with those communities is so much better to me than taking your ball and staying home.
Well, that actually, it actually leads really well to this next question that has to do with, how are the charities identified? How do you choose? It's not some sort of nationwide thing. It's something that's local, right? And I'll position this. I'll throw this to you, Elena. How did you decide, for example, to choose a charity that you did in Nashville, and how is Social Offset helping to select the charities moving forward?
So the one in Nashville was just Aaron Fuller had researched it, and it was easy. It was local, already had 501c status. So it was Abortion Care of Tennessee. So that was an easy one to pick. And we decided, because it was minimum viable products, right? What's a small enough thing to tackle? We just decided to do one charity with one cause. So, and some people criticized us for that, saying, hey, what about, Tennessee's not great for racism. It's not great for LGBTQ plus folks. And was like, we get it, but this is minimum viable product. We picked one charity with one cause. Going forward, we'll pick more. So we have yet to open it up to another association and city as we get our paperwork filed with the IRS and things like that. But we're going to do a mix of things. One, we're going to ask whoever's sponsoring us, who do they know in their local towns, right? That's usually the best place. Who's doing the best work with LGBTQ rights, plus rights, or anti-racism, or hunger, or reproductive rights. So if they have an opinion, we'll collect that information. We'll do our own research in terms of, we have about 30 people who have raised their hand and said they're willing to volunteer for us. We'll have them look for local charities. We'll look at Guide Store and Charity Navigator to make sure these charities are actually active and they have their 501c3, which is their nonprofit status, to make sure that they're still active. And we know a lot of people start charities and unfortunately sometimes they fold. So we want to make sure that they're ready to receive the money that they're going to get. And then we're going to pick up the phone and say, is it okay that we raise money on your behalf, to make sure that we're aligned? I don't know. Rhonda,
yeah. You can tell my breath was bated, right? Like I was. This idea of the way that Social Offset is positioning to help vet the charities involved is so powerful to me. It's challenging, right? It just helps it be easier, right? It just helps make it turnkey to activate in a way that I don't know, is really exciting to me. I think the idea that we're not only making sure that certain criteria are true at the on the outside, right? They've got their legal status, they, have a reasonably strong reputation and rating. It is one thing, but going a step deeper to also make sure that the contributions made are materially going to benefit the community that the nonprofit is set out to benefit is another piece of it. That 75 cents on the dollar or better has to go to creating impact on the front line. And I think that is incredibly impactful. Anyone who's ever done their own research to figure out where they want to contribute, if they're able, knows that it's actually really hard, and it takes a lot of work and checking to really vet these kinds of organizations to make sure that our dollars are going to the best possible place. And so that piece excites me quite a lot.
And it will always have to be local. I mean, to add to Rhonda, like, it's not about giving to national organizations, but if you're really truly offsetting your local spend, then we need the offset to also be in the local area to really truly offset that. The other thing, just in the last couple of weeks, talking to cities and association folks who are event organizers who may use us, is understanding that sometimes they need a little bit of political cover to say, hey, social offset is going to pick the charities based on our objectives. And we're happy to do that. We want to make some noise. How much noise we make can ebb and flow based on whoever needs our help at that time.
Yeah. And I think that what's exciting is being a part and listening to the development of how things are moving forward. And there are still questions, right? There are still things that as a group we're trying to figure out through social offset. How do we answer these questions and what do we do moving forward? It's not as if there's this one solution that presents itself and it's like, oh, this is social offset. We have all of all of the questions answered. We know exactly how it's going to roll out. So it's really continuing to refine and define what it is that social offset is hoping to accomplish and how we're going to do it. So to that point, I want to, for those people who are listening, who are association executives, or you're on that side of things, I want you to understand from the destinations side of things, why those cities, why those destinations are wanting to work with social offset too, because a lot of times we're not always thinking from these different perspectives. So why is it, like, why would you have an organization, a destination, Salt Lake City, that wants to work with social offset? What's in it for them? And I'll put that, Rhonda or Elena.
You want to go?
Yeah.
I'll start it off, right? Obviously that's not my own perspective, but in talking with colleagues that I have in those spaces, in those roles, certainly they're also in a very difficult position when there is legislation, often legislation that conflicts with their organization's own values as well. So that's one piece, right? Whether they can, proclaim that, publicly or not is a separate, highly political question. And we all know how politicized environments are and how polarized environments are these days. So it's a tricky place. But of course, they don't want to see this, whole segments of their business coming under pressure or being under pressure when they bring their events to their destinations, right? They don't want that for their clients and for their clients' guests either. And so being part of helping their clients have channels like social offset to feel whole, to mitigate and balance, right, what's going on in their state, so that their state or their city or their locale can be, attractive and competitive, I think is really part of what's in it for a lot of DMOs.
Yeah. Elena, anything to add?
I'm going to talk about red and blue in terms of partisan, but this is bigger than that. But as a shorthand, many of the convention centers we go to, and many of the convention centers and the CBBs and the big cities are blue cities, whether they're in blue states or red states or purple states. So they're trying to figure out how to work within the constraints that they're in, so they're able to tell their future client, hey, we'll build this page for you. So it will be socialoffset.org/ your association name will support that, or we're going to do a /Salt Lake or a /Seattle. But one of the things when Seattle pledged, I was thinking, I didn't expect Visit Seattle to pledge, because they're a blue city in a blue state, solidly blue. And then I realized, one, they care about all of the cities. But when I think about it, the other thing is, when you think about it from an event organizer's standpoint, and if you go think about board of directors for associations, they really have 3 options to do right now, because all of them are talking about, not all of them, most of them are talking about this issue. They can say, we're going to ignore politics, we're going to ignore policies, we're just going to go wherever we want, whenever we want, that fits our objectives, who cares? The second thing is, they can say, you know what, we're only going to stick, depending on where they are on the political spectrum, we're just going to stay in blue cities and blue states and cross our fingers that it's still blue by the time our event happens. Or they can take a third option, which is, this is too hard, too messy, let's go 100% virtual. And that hurts the entire industry. And it hurts the power of in-person events, which I think for the 3 of us on this call, I know for Beth and other people on our board of directors, in-person events are just so meaningful. That's how we all met. So we're certainly biased, but it's, we all want in-person events. So how can we help any city that wants to do the right thing and offer something to their clients to help them with that?
Yeah. I mean, I just love that there is this new tool, this new way for individuals and organizations to actually have a big impact. And I know we've been dreaming about, what's it going to look like in some of these next pilots that we go out, because we've had a number of associations who've reached out who want to be a part of this. They're like, okay, let's social offset our next event. And now we're going through this process of, okay, so this is what it is. How are we going to go about this? What questions are we going to ask? So for those people who are out there listening and thinking, ooh, I'm curious, maybe this is good for our association. We've certainly been having these conversations ourselves. What should they do? How do they interact? What should they do? Should they come to you, Elena? Should they come to info@socialoffset.com?
Yeah, so you can do any of those. So great question. If anybody's listening to this who's interested, I mean, certainly reach out. If you know Kiki or Rhonda, you can reach out to them directly. Other people on the board of directors, you can reach out to them. Christy Tarantino Dean, Erin Fuller, Beth Sermont, Mark Beebe, James Pogue, all of these are heavy hitters in our space. If you know any of them, just reach out to them. We're a friendly group on our board. Or you can send a note to info@socialoffset.com, and we'll see how your objectives match with our objectives in terms of where we are on the trajectory of when we can actually go live with something. Right now, we have socialoffset.com, which can collect donations if we go through a different charity. And our goal is hopefully in October sometime go live with socialoffset.org, which will make it much easier for people to actually create a profile and an account and be able to donate to the charities that best meet their needs as they travel across the country and as they travel to different events. So long answer to your question, Kiki. Email someone that's on the board of directors, or info@socialoffset.com.
All right. This sounds like a perfect place to end, but I'm going to actually, because I'm looking at the clock and thinking I could actually ask you one more question. What is lighting you up the most when you're thinking about this project, Social Offset, in the future? What lights you up the most? I'm going to give you a second to think about it, but really no more than that. Elena, and then I'm going to go to you, Rhonda.
Besides getting to work with Kiki and Rhonda all the time,
right?
It's the possibilities. I mean, the endless possibilities that maybe one day we'll be able to create that app that I envisioned at the Dallas airport, where I can buy that sandwich because it's the only thing to eat, and then give 62 cents to a charity. Or we have socialoffset.org/Lizzo or /Pink or /Sundance, Film Festival slash South by Southwest that we have. It's kind of like Wikipedia in terms of how big it is and ubiquitous it is, that no matter where you go, if you're traveling across country and you just stopped at 7-Eleven or Circle K in a area and you want to offset it, you just have it. So it's what the possibilities is what gets me most excited.
I love it. Rhonda, what's your response to that?
Sure. So I'm going to give you like a two-part answer if I can. One is sort of big picture, and I'm really, really energized about the potential for impact, which is a little bit stealing, Elena, from your answer. but there's this, the possibilities of where social offset could go is one thing, but the possibilities and the real huge potential that I'm seeing and sensing here for impact on issues that matter so much to so many of us is really what's going to keep my energy at a really high level for this for the duration. My second answer is there's some day-to-day things that do keep me going too, in addition, right? So there is this awesome work group that's formed and more awesome volunteers joining in, and that's always wonderful. I'm a numbers person. And so the idea of digging in to the dollars and cents of it all is really attractive to me, right? Really looking at what is that amount that needs to be offset to even break even? And do we want to set goals above that even, right? And how do we help build tools that help organizations and event organizers and individuals to calculate that social impact so that they can offset it? That piece is also quite exciting to me as well.
I love the impact. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to add on, but we raised over $3,500 in Nashville with bubble gum and Scotch tape idea. We were minimum viable product. So if we can raise $3,500 to a local charity with us doing as little as we do, imagine what we can do when we all work together and do something big scale, and we can get the money to people who are on the front lines doing the work that we want, that we support. Yeah. That's exciting. You're right, Rhonda. I like her answer better.
No, stop. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me on Association Chat today. And I want to encourage everyone to reach out to Elena and to Rhonda and to visit socialoffset.org. You can also visit socialoffset.com. Elena, Rhonda, thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be talking to you very shortly. I know I will.
You're welcome, and thank you.
All right. Oh my gosh. What did you think? Wasn't that amazing? I am thrilled to see the progress that's been made just from this idea that started in an airport that made its way and has now become a nonprofit with, that is making an impact, that it has a great future and has some amazing people working with it. So please, I hope you learned something today that you're going to be able to use in your lives moving forward. And as I always say, keep asking questions to learn every day. Because why? Because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.